Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Mellionaire House. Today's video is a DIY. We are installing Lifeproof luxury vinyl plank flooring in our master bedroom. This is video number 3 in my Extreme Master Bedroom Makeover series, and today we are installing the floor. So I'm going to share the details on what we did and give you a couple of tips to avoid some of the mistakes we made. But first, if you walk away from this video with at least one new idea or tip or trick, please give it a like and consider subscribing to the channel. As I mentioned earlier in video number 1, we talked about painting and I shared some of my top tips on how to choose the right paint color. Then we did a $70 DIY board and batten wall. So now let's take a look at some of the selection process for choosing my flooring. Okay, so I wanted to show you I've probably looked at probably close to 100 different floor samples, and the more I looked, the harder it got to try to make a decision. I almost went with this one, but there's just way too much gray in there for me. So I finally decided on this one right here in the middle. From a budget standpoint, from a durability standpoint, I'm pretty sure exactly what I'm looking for. Lots of beige tones and browns and some grays in there. So even if we did decide to change the furniture later, I can be able to work with what we have on the floor. So I just ordered it. It should be ready hopefully in the next day or so. Curbside pickup. And we'll go from there. So what I liked most about Lifeproof and why I finally decided on this brand is because it comes with an underlayment attached to each plank, which meant that I could skip an entire step. So after just some minimal, simple subfloor prep, we were able to lay right over our concrete floors. So just make sure you read all of the instructions, the warranty information. In fact, you want to make sure you go over the warranty information because in this instance, if you laid additional underlayment, you could void your warranty. So the first thing I did to get started was to remove the baseboards. Originally, I was going to leave the baseboards on and add quarter round, but we don't have quarter round anywhere else in the house. So I wanted to keep the look of the master consistent with everything else. And so to take it off, I used a utility knife and a screwdriver to kind of gently bang in between the drywall and the board because I wanted to reuse them afterwards. And apparently there's a drywall tool that I could have used, but I didn't know it at the time and I didn't have one. So I just did it my way and it worked out just fine. I had to remove the carpet that was closest to the baseboard just to make it a little bit easier to pull off. There are carpet tacks underneath the carpet. I didn't know this. This was my first time doing it and they are very sharp. I got cut a few times. So just be mindful of that if this is your first time as well. I ended up putting on gloves later on in this project. One thing that I did when I took these off that I found to be extremely helpful, if you look down in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, you'll see an A1. I wasn't quite sure how long or short each piece of baseboard would be, so I marked each wall or assigned each wall with a letter. You know, the first wall was letter A, the second wall was letter B, and so on. And then each piece with the number. That way, when I went back, I would know exactly where it came from. Now, this part of the project was the hardest. Originally, like I said, I wasn't planning to pull off the baseboards, so I did the board and batten wall first. So everything was really snug over here. I finally got it off, but it took a lot of extra effort. And so that's the one thing I would have done a little bit differently had I known. So just make sure you plan everything out if you've got a big project like this. Yay, I did it. To make sure you kind of do everything in the right step. I also had to go behind myself and make sure I pulled out any leftover brad nails that were left in the wall or in the actual molding. And after that, it was time to start pulling up the carpet.
At the Mellionaire House, it's always cool. We're living a life where happiness rules. Call us the G-Force and we hope that you will stay for weekly daily life updates to inspire in some way. Up first there's Phil, we call him Ben Buttons. Check him out at the gym where he's always cutting. Then of course there's Mel, the millionaire, the COO of the fam who styles a home with flair. The Prima's super busy with the dance on the daily, and the twins are always up to something fun and crazy. It's not all perfect, but we always work it out. Teaching family rules, love is what it's all about. Hey. Millionaire house, it's always cool. We're living a life where happiness rules at the Millionaire House.
After a good night's sleep, we got up bright and early the next morning to get started. I gave the directions another thorough review, and then I took several different boxes and opened them, pulled out the planks, and gave myself a layout so that I could pull one plank from each row, keeping a nice variation. So I started in the entry with a transition piece. And then I started laying out my first row. The first couple of rows are the most time consuming, or at least they were for us. These are the most important rows because this is going to really set the stage for how the rest of your floor lays out. So I'd like to talk to you a little bit more about why I chose this product. Lifeproof was really a standout for me because one, it's waterproof, but more importantly, it's scratch resistant. And we have two dogs. Our kids don't really come in our room that much, but the dogs definitely do. So a scratch resistant floor was important to me. This particular color is called Harrington Acadia. If I'm not mistaken, this is one of the newer colors in the Lifeproof lineup, but I was really drawn to it because the embossed texture creates the feel of the real wood flooring. I'd also like to mention that you really don't need fancy tools to install this flooring. We used the saw because we already had it out because of the board and batten wall, but you can actually use a utility knife to score and cut the planks. Now's probably a great time to talk about the first mistake we made, which was a measuring mistake. So I'll give you a tip, which is to make sure that your measurements account for the interlocking portion of the plank. Even though the plank measures 48 inches in length, the interlocking area will add about half an inch onto that you'll want to account for. Finally, we were out of that first row and that door entry area. You can see our little project manager joined us and pretty much stuck through the entire project. Our oldest even came in and tested out the smoothness of the flooring, which was quite a treat because we're not going to get to see her dance on stage this year for the first time since she was 2 years old. Oh, I'm such a proud mama, but time to get back to work. We were surprised by the time we got more than halfway through this project that the floor still needed a pretty significant amount of weight once we secured each plank together. So we finally worked out a little bit of a system where one of us would bear weight on one end of the plank while the other one would secure it in place. And of course, Theodore the Great wanted to make sure every step of the way that we were doing what we were supposed to be doing. If you don't know anything about Frenchies, let me just say they literally love to be in the middle or in the center of everything. Remember that mistake I mentioned to you earlier in the video? I want to elaborate on that a little bit more. When measuring a cut with these planks, you have to remember that they only install in one direction. So when you get to the end of a row, flipping the plank upside down will help you cut the right end and not waste material. It really took us a couple of rows before we figured it out, but once we got into a groove, everything was pretty easy. I really wish you could have heard some of our background conversations while we were laying this floor because they were pretty funny, but we were also playing music the entire time, so we can't let you hear what we were talking about. But I did manage to find one little clip when I was editing this video that made me laugh out loud. Wait for it. Yeah, that was me. Please tell me in the comments below that you know where that little tagline came from. Okay, YouTube friends, this is pretty much the end, and phew, I am so glad to be done with that project. On an easiness scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being the easiest installation and 10 being the hardest, I would probably give it a 7. I actually expected it to be a little easier, but to be fair, this was the first time we ever laid a floor. But I am really happy with how it turned out. It looks so beautiful and even better in person. A labor of love for sure, and we are almost ready to wrap up this series. I'm just waiting on the furniture. In the next video, I'll show you some of my favorite decor selections that I picked out, including this new chandelier. I would love to hear in the comments below if you have a favorite episode so far. As always, I appreciate you watching, and until next time, love and peace.